Hey, welcome back to the X podcast. I'm at the long table with Mr. Moore. How are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Don't know when this will air, but just for our little current events dabbling, Syria, the fall of the Assad regime has dominated the news.
That's been crazy.
And now everybody wants in on the action. Israel's bombing. Turkey's, I think, done some bombing. The U.S. has done some bombing. And
where?
In Syria.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Israel pretty much took out their navy. I mean, destroyed their entire fleet. The U.S. has gone in and bombed several ISIS strongholds. It's been crazy.
Well, I'm pretty sure we supported the coup.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure we backed the coup to get rid of Assad and that regime, who is now hiding in, at least at the time of this recording, in Russia.
Yes. Yeah. Pretty crazy.
That's interesting. Another foothold is gone for Russia.
Yeah, it's been a bad year for Russia and Iran. Bad year for Russia and Iran.
Yeah. Did you think this weakens Iran?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
In what ways?
That was one of the main areas that Iran could smuggle weapons. It was one of the main areas that Iran reputationally was helping uphold. I mean, really, the Assad regime would not have lasted as long as it did without Russia and Iran's military support.
Yeah.
And propping them up. But I mean, the atrocities that are coming out of the prisons. I mean, we knew this was a brutal regime, but oh my gosh,
really?
It's grotesque. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I watched an interview last night with someone that endured torture there, and yeah, it's crazy. But anyways, a lot going on in the world. It's kind of our end of the year podcast.
Yeah.
And we want to do some processing. But since it's end of the year, I want to read some stats that came out of our Spotify Wrapped.
Yes, I saw that.
So for all...
Some of them were a little hard to believe. I don't know how this works, but...
But, if you're listening and you've been listening for a while,
Or watching.
we want to celebrate with you. I want to go through some of these stats. Average Spotify rating out of 5 is 4.5. Not bad at all. It's strong. This one found super interesting. 51% of you listening were new listeners this year.
Wow.
51%. That's high.
Yeah.
So welcome to the X podcast. And let's see, 27% new growth, 48 top fans. It's pretty phenomenal.
What does that mean?
So 48 people had us as their number one top listen or watch on Spotify.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
That's surprising.
Yeah. So let's see here. What else? The age breakdowns were interesting. There wasn't anyone that was like crazy high or crazy low. The highest was 28%. That was ages 35 through 44. But then what was tied almost was 30 through 34 and 45 through 54. And then actually right below 35 through 44, 20%, 25 through 29. And then 12%, 18 through 24, 15%, 55 and up. Really interesting, kind of all across the board. By far, the most listened to was the Antichrist Beast one. I forget what it's called.
What was it called? Was it the Mark of the Beast?
It was episode 181, questions about the Mark of the Beast and the Antichrist. What does that say about you, dear listener? That that was your... We have listeners from eight different countries, the U.S. obviously being the top. But the one that blew us away, we literally spent an hour fact-checking this.
I don't know.
AI.
You did. I
Lydia, we were all looking at it. We're like, if this is true, but it's true. Our show... your humble correspondence, and you joining this, you have helped make this the top 10% of videos watched on Spotify in the podcast category. That's crazy.
I don't get that.
So it literally says our show is in the top 10% of videos.
Well, here's part of why I don't get it. I don't even watch videos on Spotify.
Yeah, you don't. I don't either. But
that's
other
what I'm
people
saying.
do. I don't even use Spotify. I'm an old school loyal Apple. I do Apple for everything. Podcast.
I think if
music.
I watch, it's probably YouTube.
Yeah.
I think if I listen, it's
Same.
usually Apple.
Same. I do think
So
the watch feature is somewhat new as far as people watching podcasts
So maybe
on Spotify.
17 people watched it, and it put us in the top 10%.
Don't belittle what God is doing.
Okay. I do not want to put any of the responsibility of this podcast on God at all.
True. Me neither.
I'm not putting any of it on him.
Me neither.
That's all on you.
Yeah, we don't blame God or the church for what happens at this table. But I think it's worth
That's
celebrating.
cool. Yeah.
And so I just,
Say
for all
thank
of you
you.
that have been listening and watching, thank you so much. With that, though, I want to issue a challenge. With celebration can come challenge.
Oh, really?
So I have a challenge.
Yeah.
I want to get in our face a little bit. While these statistics were phenomenal and kind of blew my mind a little bit, to be honest, the last, at least on Apple, the last review left, I looked this morning,
Okay.
was over a year ago.
Oh, we
from
need-
a long-time listener. So if I can just, if you'll allow me,
Yeah.
dear listener and watcher, to just...
For Christmas. Even though it's over by the time this comes out.
As a late Christmas gift, do us a favor. I understand. I listen to podcasts all the time. I skip through the outro. I skip through all the pitiful pleas for reviews and comments and shares and likes and subscribes. But if you've been benefited from this podcast, would you do us a Christmas miracle favor and actually pause it right now and go to Apple or Spotify, leave a 5-star review, actually write something, write what this has meant to you. Here's the thing. This kind of irritated me. I looked this morning on Apple, and there are actually a ton of X podcasts now.
Really?
And ours are almost impossible to find. Even though the statistics are really, really good, it is almost impossible to find our X podcast because there's a number of them now. And believe it or not, if you're listening or watching, reviews help a weird amount with the algorithms. And so do us a favor.
Podcast.
Yeah, there's actually one right now I don't think you should watch or listen to.
Huh. I think it's the first one that pulled up. Well, it says best Christmas gifts for your significant other. That one? It actually shows. When I pull up the...
Not on mine.
When I pull up the X podcast, there's only a couple of them. There was only a couple shows, and we were the second one on there.
Oh, mine didn't do that. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyways, do us a favor. Leave a review. It would mean the world to us. Help get the word out. But it's the end of the year. And
I really want to know when this. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah,
I really want to know when this. You can't see information. I want to know where this one, the X podcast. It's got this girl on the front of it holding a microphone. I really want to know when she started.
yeah, I don't know.
I want to know if we were first. She
All
has
right.
100 episodes.
100 episodes. Okay. So, end of the year, how are you feeling? Christmas was amazing.
It was incredible.
So good.
I loved Christmas.
It was so good.
It's over.
We're recording this before Christmas.
What?
If you can't tell.
Don't tell them that.
Okay, sorry.
What are you doing? You're giving up the illusion
I'm giving
of
the peek behind the curtain.
us sitting here on the day it comes out.
I know.
Talking.
It's Christmas morning, and you wanted to spend it with me
Yes, I did.
at the podcast
Merry
table.
Christmas.
And so,
Merry Christmas to everybody out there.
yes.
If you didn't hear it before this, we'll say it. Merry Christmas.
So good to be
And
here.
hope you have a wonderful new year, a safe new year. Mm-hmm. But
Yeah. So
great Christmas, amazing.
Yeah.
We had an incredible time at church.
I love what you surprised me with for Christmas.
Yeah.
It blew my mind.
Oh, I bet it did.
Honestly.
Bet it
blew
did.
my mind. As we approach the end of the year, what's going through your mind? I mean, I know you're not, you would say you're not as nostalgic as I am. So I did
Nostalgia's
something this weekend that I enjoyed doing, but I thought to myself, I laughed. I was like, Pastor Tim would never, ever, ever do this. I don't think. Maybe I'm wrong.
Probably not.
But I did what I do every year. I started my my highlights of the year list, and I literally went through from January to now and started writing out all my highlights.
Let's do it. Let's see them.
I
did
mean,
not,
I won't.
but
I
love
won't say
this.
all of them.
I didn't. Okay. Well, we'll.
Yeah.
You want to hit some of those? That's the idea. A little bit.
We'll hit a few of them, but
Yeah.
yeah. So
Was that fun?
it's
probably a good idea to do this.
You know,
It's your great gratitude journal kind of.
yeah, it's a weird feeling. You forget how much happens in a year, and you forget how much you quickly forget.
Yeah.
And you forget how many meaningful experiences have happened that you've not taken time to feel. There's this guy named Bob Goff I really love, New York Times bestselling author. He's the U.S. consul to Uganda, just fascinating guy. I really resonate with him. He talks about, he said he has this almost OCD habit his entire life is he writes down every memory because he's terrified
Wow.
That he'll get to the end of his life and won't remember it. And he's like, if he doesn't write it down, it's almost like it didn't happen. And the Enneagram Wing 4 nostalgia side of me really connects to that, because my whole life I've always been sentimental, always been nostalgic. But there's something about coming to the end of a year for me, especially in the winter, and it's just a very more reflective, slower time of year.
Yeah.
And thinking back through all that's happened, good and bad, and reflecting and allowing myself to feel it again. It's a interesting exercise.
How do you feel coming out of that?
Grateful. Yeah, grateful. It's for me, nostalgia is by definition, it's like a bittersweet feeling. So
Yeah.
bittersweet.
Yeah.
Bittersweet but grateful.
Well, I think it's reflective of life. Life is not all highs and it's not all lows.
Yeah.
And I think, life has, I can think back of just some really incredible moments and things this year. Think back of some of the more challenging ones that we faced. I just think that's every year.
Yeah.
That's life. So that's probably good to remember the highlights and forget the lowlifes.
Yeah. I like
Like
it.
I said, forget the
I
lowlifes. Okay, here's something.
Okay.
As we're something we always like to do.
Yeah.
In such a weird, morbid fashion. Is to talk
I
about-
didn't do it this year.
Yeah, so
I forgot.
Well, I just pulled up a list. Why do we have to do anything? I just pulled up a list.
Okay.
I actually had started a list at one point. I was keeping it. Then I was like, I think it's usually just public knowledge and it's out there.
Yeah.
But we always love to kind of reminisce over some of the people that passed away this year. So, some names of people that are no longer with us, and most of them are older, and so maybe if you're a younger person, you may not recognize some of these names. One big one that I remember was Darth Vader. James Earl Jones. The voice of Darth Vader.
Yeah.
And other things.
Yeah.
Incredible voice. But he was one. This one I forgot even happened. Kind of took me back, flashback to the 90s. Shannon Doherty.
Oh, yeah.
90210. Like kind of just remembering that. Donald Sutherland. Do you know who he is? I think it's Kiefer Sutherland's dad, but he's an old actor. If you saw his picture, you would recognize him immediately. Richard Simmons.
Oh, that's right.
Richard Simmons passed away this year. Carl Weathers. Apollo Creed
Yeah.
from Rocky.
Wow.
Apollo Creed passed away this year. Phil Donahue. Dr. Ruth.
Who's Dr. Ruth?
For real? Sex therapist, Dr. Ruth.
I never
heard of Dr. Ruth?
Uh-uh.
Oh, okay. Never mind then. You can just move on.
Okay.
You never heard of Dr. Ruth? I mean, she's older. Don't get me wrong, but she was like the leading voice for sex therapy, probably back in the 90s and whatever. You never heard of Dr. Ruth? It was always kind of like, I don't say, risque, but she kind of normalized talking about sex.
Oh.
In a time when nobody ever did. Probably even further back than that. But yeah, I didn't know you didn't know about Dr. Ruth and I don't know. There's some other names on here. There's some other ones on here, but I don't know. Liam Payne, Quincy Jones, Maggie Smith. I don't recognize that. There was somebody else more significant that passed away. I totally forgot about If the Glove Doesn't Fit.
O.J. Simpson.
O.J. Simpson passed away this last year. I forgot about that.
Yeah, Pastor Steve can't tell his breakfast jokes anymore.
Oh. There's, again, variety of people that passed away. I don't know why. It's a little morbid. Lou Dobbs. I don't know. I'm looking through some of these names. Shelley Duvall.
You know, the other thing that people probably think is weird that I also do, I've not done this yet, so I think I probably have bore our listeners in previous episodes and years, but is I always love to look back and, okay, what are my favorite movies that came out that year? What are my favorite albums and new songs that came out that year? What are my favorite books that I read this year? That's another thing I like to do. I've not done that yet. But
what was your favorite book you read this year?
Oh, that's...
Whoa, you got it. We're trying to process. What was your favorite book?
Oh, my gosh.
It's easy for me because a majority of them are on Audible, and so I have my entire list right here.
I just got done listening to... or reading Life's Golden Ticket by Brandon Bouchard. I loved Beholding by Cohen Strahan. I loved Irwin's new book, Seven Frequencies of Communication. I loved, there's
okay, I'll give you a few that I read this year.
Besides Confidence. I know your favorite was Confidence.
Yes,
besides
Confidence was at the top of my list.
Yeah.
Read that this year. Reconnected by Carlos
Yes,
Whitaker was
so
such a great
good.
book.
So good.
So that's just it's kind of a
Yeah.
fun read that almost kind of, for a moment, snaps you back into your soul so you don't lose your life on your screen. I'm going to look at my screen while I do this.
Yeah.
Fighting Shadows was a really good book
So
by
good.
John Tyson. We encouraged a lot of the men of this house to read. I thought that one was a really
great.
good one. I'm trying to look and see, like, this year which ones were. I mean, I'm trying to think something else that somebody else would.
I didn't finish it,
The
but
Anxious Generation.
I read the book on Einstein after I got back from Switzerland. It was fascinating.
Which one? There's a million out there.
I mean, it's supposed to be his most prominent biography.
One I just finished. I'll talk about that one another time, though.
Okay.
That was a really good book. So I don't know. There's a lot of The Revenge of the Tipping Point. Malcolm Gladwell. That one came out. It was a great
Yeah.
book. So yeah, I don't know. That happened. What else did you say? Music? I don't know.
I always go back to albums.
Okay, I feel like albums are not a. I don't know. I
Movies.
don't.
And I always see. I mean, I see like I probably see at least 50 new movies in theaters every year. I mean, I go almost once a week.
That's a lot. So
I
what
know.
was the top movie you saw?
I don't know. I'm gonna have to go back and look.
Did you write it down? What's your top
Well,
movie?
that's what I'm saying. I haven't made my list yet.
There was a movie that I saw that was really good earlier this year, and I forget now.
I love Gladiator 2.
I didn't see it.
Love Bonhoeffer.
Didn't see it.
You didn't see Gladiator 2?
No, not yet.
That's good.
No. Saw Wicked.
But those two
It was,
yeah, I don't.
Did you go
wanna
see it? You got to go
No.
see it. It was everybody. Okay,
People are
if
going
you
to
were-
hate my reaction to that.
Yeah,
People either love it or
I-
hate it.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I wasn't a theater major. Let me
Yeah.
just say that in high school.
Yeah.
And so I think if you're anybody that was a theater major who loved to sing and loved that, like you would go to musicals, they're not probably my favorite thing anyway. So it was
I saw
done
more-
well. It was done well.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily love musicals.
I don't know if this is a good thing, but I saw more suspenseful, scary movies this year than I've seen in decades.
Really?
Yeah, and I loved the new one with Josh Hartnett. Was it Escape or Trap with M. Night Shyamalan? His daughter made it. Oh my
That
gosh,
wasn't the-
so good.
Oh,
so good.
That looks freaky.
Yeah, that was so good.
That was good.
Yeah.
A movie, one of my favorite movie moments of the year.
Oh, I saw Y2K Friday. Did you see the trailers of that?
No.
Okay, it was kind of stupid, but
Why
it-
to? Oh, I think I did see it a long while ago.
It's based on 1999, and it's like this teen comedy / horror of what if everything did go wrong
Oh,
at midnight
I kind of would enjoy that.
and the world ends. It's very fun.
Okay, I would kind of enjoy
And
that.
very nostalgic.
Yeah, I saw a movie as the time recording this. Probably one of my favorite movie experiences of the year.
Okay.
Moana 2.
Really?
Yeah. Only because
You saw the Cohen.
it was Cohen's first movie. So he sat on Lolly's lap right next to us. I got pictures. And he was perfect and mesmerized the whole time. He sat there, just stared at the screen. Like almost never made a peep for almost a 2-hour movie. Didn't move, really. Mesmerized.
Really?
And they got done. And right as we got done, we're watching the credits. We stuck around to the last ones in there. And he goes, again? We're like, oh, no, we can't. You can't watch this again. You know, he's used to watching movies and the same movies.
Yeah.
Moana's one of his favorite movies. That and Grinch.
Oh,
Those are his
wow.
two favorite movies. And he asks for it all the time. And he knows all the different scenes.
Yeah.
And he knows some of the songs. And he sings some of the songs with it. I mean, he's 18 months old, but he knows your what. And he'll ask
Yeah.
for certain songs. And so it's so cute. He had such a blast. Driving home, Lauren was texting us all the things he was processing the movie while he was driving home.
Really?
Yes,
Okay.
and it was hilarious. He was saying things like, well, actually, he got done. First thing he said, I seed it. he keeps saying, I seed it. I seed it. Moana, I seed it.
awesome.
That's what he said. And driving home, he says, movie, like it. Moana 2. I was telling him it was Moana 2. I was trying to
Yeah.
explain to him, this is another Moana movie. And then he said, Uncle, fun, because Chance was there. And then we were kind
Wait,
of
I'm
goofing off
Uncle.
afterwards.
I'm Uncle.
Well, he's actually Uncle.
Okay.
And then he was going through and he says, Uncle, Dee Dee, Pop, Lolly, movie. So everybody that was there, besides Mom and Dad, he was naming all their names and movie. Uncle,
awesome.
dancing.
Cohen's awesome.
I mean, it was hilarious. So
Hey,
that was one of my best movie experiences of the
One
year.
of my fun highlights maybe was this past Sunday.
Yeah.
I'm.
When you said this past Sunday, what do you mean?
I mean,
Like as in
literally-
like Christmas
literally past
experiences on December
No,
22nd?
no,
that you're
literally
talking about?
past Sunday.
Are you giving up the illusion of
Yes.
us recording this
I'm
the week
destroying
of
the
Christmas?
illusion.
Why are you doing that?
So
You're not good at this.
on one Sunday, I am. The sun came out a little bit, and it was a little bit warm, and not warm, but warmer. And so I went to Schiller Park, my favorite place in German Village. Went for a run. I finished my run. I walk around the park a few times. I'm getting ready to go back to my car. I see this car pass by with an extra sticker on it, and I'm a crazy man, so I have my running shoes on. I start running parallel to it and waving and trying to see who it is. And they roll down the window, and it is Todd Whitman. And he goes, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm in my second home. What are you doing?" And he said, "Getting ready to see the lights. Pastor Tim and Laura are coming." I said, "I know that's a lie." And he said, "No, they are." And I'm like, "Why does PT keep keeping these secrets?" Laura Lee buys my same car. I don't find out till 3 weeks later. You're going to German Village where I am, and like
I didn't know you were there.
Yeah, but like I live in German Village, and I try to get you to go all the time.
No.
So, anyways, he's like, "You want to hop in the car, go with us?" It's like, "Sure." So I ended up walking around with y'all for hours, and it was, German Village lights blew me away. It was, it blew everybody else away except you, but everybody was there. It went on for miles and miles and miles. Your efficiency level, the parking situation, I get it, but it was but being there with Cohen, seeing the lights, we went crazy. Was it St. Mary's or whatever?
Church, yeah.
And he's just, just sitting there, and all of a sudden, lights.
Yeah.
Lights.
He just points stuff
He just
out.
points.
Yeah.
It was so funny. And then we took him to see the reindeer.
Yeah.
He goes, "I like it."
I like it. I like it. He's starting to say sentences now. He's to the point where he's saying sentences.
Yeah.
They're really cute. Usually, like I seed it. He said the other day, he said, "Truck, I seed it." Or he says this, when we had a piano, like a little electronic piano. We were over at his, Laura's mom's house for celebrating a birthday. And she had one of those little electronic pianos, and he would go and he'd hit a key, and he'd go, "I heard it."
I love that.
He'd hit the keys and make a noise. He'd go, "I heard it."
And for anybody listening, if you haven't turned this off yet, number one. Number two, if you don't know the context, Cohen is Pastor Tim's great-grandson.
Whoa,
and
stop.
He's amazing.
He's my grandson.
He's awesome. And yeah.
He is amazing. So we just wanted to take a moment to also talk about the power of processing.
Yeah.
Some of this is, we like to kind of just reminisce throughout the year. Sometimes we will talk about all the major cultural events. There weren't any this year.
Yeah.
Do you know of any cultural events that happened?
Maybe being for real?
Yeah.
A ton. It was election year.
Like what happened? Other than the election, did anything else happen? So actually, speaking to that, we did have an election, and we have a change, which we were going to have a change no matter what. But if we go back to July, is it July or June, when we had the first presidential debate, so much changed.
Oh, yeah.
In 4 or 5 months.
Yep.
When you just think back to it, that whole thing was very fascinating.
I saw a meme the other day that said historians are going to have a field day with the 2020s.
Yeah. So
you think about it from 2020.
Yeah, till now with COVID and the election and everything else that happened. So it's been an interesting year in that regard. You have stuff continuing with Russia and Ukraine. That just doesn't seem like it's going to end anytime soon.
Israel, Hamas,
Lebanon,
and Syria.
Israel and with Hezbollah, and then that kind of had a ceasefire, which didn't seem to last very long. And so, I don't know, there's been anything else cultural that, when you think back to this past year, you're the one that has a steel trap for a mind that's supposed to remember every single thing you ever hear.
There's just so much.
I know.
So much.
I literally, it is interesting how time just continues to move by. And again, I think there was so many good things that happened this year. There were a lot of I think we all had there were some good experiences that we had.
Yeah.
We celebrate a lot of those this coming, depending on when you listen. So we put timestamps, but podcasts live forever.
Yeah.
So at the time this comes out, this next weekend, we're doing our end of the year recap.
Yeah.
And so we kind of personally talked about things that we are remembering. And so what, if you want to name, I don't know if anybody listens to the podcast or watches, you'll get a little bit of a preview, but you could just say, what was one highlight for you?
Oh,
probably your book.
I think the book bled through every day of this year for me, for sure.
Yeah.
2 years in the making, came out, everything around it, the writing, the editing, the finishing, you graciously gave me 3 weeks. I did a whole series on it. Each one of those weeks was so unique. From the first week of unwrapping it to you and I having a conversation, week 2 to week 3, I really do feel like God did something powerful. We had, full altar response, but also a signing afterwards. And then to for me, we talked about just almost every weekend, I feel like it's a book signing or doing something and connected to the launch of the message. And it's consumed my life. And then, just my own private, personal, family, friends, relationships. All of us look back on a year, and I think we look at our jobs, our relationships, our friendships, our finances. I think, all of us have ups and downs in all those areas. And but it's been a really good year. It's been a really, really good year.
Yeah.
I think.
And you can have good years and still be processing things.
Yeah.
Like, I think one of the things that we just wanted to talk about at the end of this year is just a thought is the power of processing. I think you could go back beyond a year. There is a power to, it doesn't seem like it, because I think we're so wired that we would say action equals activity, which it does, or action equals like your change, or action equals this. But I think what precedes action is processing.
Yeah.
And I do think there is a real power that we probably don't do enough, because I know I'm terrible at this. I think you're great at it in some regards, because you do make a priority for it. But if we don't ever take time, and so maybe that's some of this episode, is we want to kind of challenge you and let you do it along with us. And so as we talk about it, hopefully you're thinking about it. What was this year? What are some of the things that happened that have changed you?
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you experienced that I would say are shifting the way you're thinking as you go into this next year, or changing some habits that you have? Or, I just think that if you don't take some time to kind of process and walk through emotions, walk through experiences, walk through hard ones, even challenging ones that do, walk through some good moments. If you don't do that, I think you're quick to forget. Because we're so distracted by so many different things. There's always something new to go on to. And I think part of why the way I'm wired is it's been years and years. And one of the things I guess that counseling has helped me do is really see the value of processing.
Yeah.
Like, that has helped me more than almost anything else over the last several years, is that when I have processed, and so I've even had some moments this year just with my counselor of just going, I just want to talk about this. I feel this way. And having somebody reflect and ask questions, and that knows you, and why do you feel this? What do you think this about the future? And I think processing the past is important, but I also think equally processing how you're feeling in the moment, how you're feeling in this season matters for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So what does that look like for you now that you would say you do that more now? What is it that prevented you feel like before from processing? And how do you practice that now?
Okay. I think before I think that's a pretty deep question, because I think everybody's a little bit different, and that's one of those soul questions that's kind of hard to answer in a quick moment. I think it's a complicated answer. I'll give some simple aspects to it. I think maybe some of this is age, and as you kind of wise up in certain things, I was so wired for achievement and moving forward and to the next thing. And there's a whole reason for that. That's kind of some of the stuff that you unpack with a counselor. Why am I like this, right? I think it's so that I could never slow down enough to even kind of, I was quick to move on from past experiences and hurts. And some of it is a defense mechanism. Yeah. You don't want to feel pain. Yeah. So you just kind of separate yourself from what happens so that you can move forward. Yeah. And so I just did most of that for most of my life. I did a lot of that, I should say. And so I never found much value in looking backwards. It's always what's ahead. So even if you had something bad, it's like, okay, but how do we fix it? How do we do this? How do we do that? Yeah. And it wasn't really until I kind of went through kind of I'd say more of a breaking moment, and spent a lengthy time processing things with a year and a half, going twice a month or more for sometimes 2+ hour sessions, of learning the importance of processing why I feel a certain way. What does this mean? And all I can say, it's really hard for me to pinpoint any one thing, but going through that process actually began to change the way I viewed things. It changed the way I thought about life. It changed some of the goals I chased after. It really did change things. And so that's why I'm kind of a big advocate. When it doesn't always have to be with a counselor, and I'm not saying it always has to be after something traumatic, and it doesn't always have to be that. But I think having a rhythm with somebody or some people where you can, just talk about sometimes deeper things that go all the way back, further back. But I think even this year, I think I talked about it already, but just spending time with a counselor going, I don't know, I was feeling this way about the future. Sometimes like we talked about it on the podcast that we did, you go into different seasons of life, and you go into different decades, and you go into different this, and all of a sudden you just start feeling different about life, and you start thinking differently. And so having someone to process that stuff has been helpful. So I go to a counselor session, and I would talk about, well, here's how I'm feeling, and this and that, and they would the person would ask questions and lead and go, and then kind of reflect back. Okay, well, I hear you saying this, and here's what I know about you. So what do you think this means? And this, and it's kind of helped me. It's helping me actually try to shape the future. That's what is fascinating. Most people think counseling is about trying to only address the past or something you currently walk through. But I think the power in processing, and again, I don't know what your view of, maybe you've gone to counseling before, you haven't, but for me, as someone who is a bit analytical, I found a counselor that was almost like, would just help me think about all of this.
Yeah.
Like even what you feel.
Right.
I need to think about what I feel.
Yeah.
Some people I just feel this.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. I'm not ultra emotional but what's helped me is actually having someone go, okay, why do you think you feel that way? Well, because I know, but like what do you think this means? What do you think is going on? What do you think? And so I had to, it was literally having a counterpart that would keep poking and prodding and asking questions to kind of peel back the layers to help me be able to go, that's what I'm feeling. And what do I need to, should I feel, or am I thinking clearly? Because here's what I'd say. Your feelings are legitimate and they're real, but your feelings can be easily clouded. It can easily cloud clarity when it comes to thinking about what it means.
Yep.
I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does.
It's a roundabout way of trying not to give too much.
Yeah. Well, go ahead. Go ahead and give too much.
Nope. I'm saving some of that.
Okay.
Working on it.
What do you think? And you're an external processor as it is.
I am.
And I think it is valuable for anybody and everybody, regardless of your personality type, to process with someone.
Yeah.
Especially at times with a professional. But something I have wondered about you before, do you have any rhythm of you on your own processing? Like, do you have any rhythm? What does it look like for you? Like, do you have any time each week where you pause and process it all?
No and yes. I do not have a set time, like how you kind of went, it's end of the year, my rhythm. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to try to remember everything, which I think is honestly a great idea. I have a horrible memory. I have a great memory and a terrible memory. I have a really good short-term memory. I can kind of almost photographic. I can look at something on a page and a string of numbers, and I can capture it in my head, and I can remember it for a while, and then I forget it. It doesn't help that I probably had the last 20-plus years kind of learning to memorize a message or a good portion of it for delivering it to move on to the next one, And so I used to, when I was in college, when I take tests, it would just go cram the day of or day before. I'd remember every day. I mean, I still remember, again, message that I'll give you a great example, right? So I remember dates I remember numbers and everything for a short time. And they'll be in me. So I did a message recently. I'll give you an example. Did a message recently. It was at our end of the year, right? Where I'm talking about how things feel to a Taylor Swift versus a middle income person.
Yep.
I can remember every number.
Yep.
$1,200 iPhone feels like $1.87. A $40,000 car feels like a $37 payment. A $300,000 house feels like a $400 payment to her. I just remember, and I won't forget that for about 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Juxtapose,
and then I will forget it. And versus like long term, like you asked me, what happened this year that was great?
It's funny.
I'm going to go, yeah, I don't know.
I was with my buddy Logan in Raleigh a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about stuff, and he was talking about, you know, I've flown out there about twice a year since they moved there in 2019. Yep, 2019. And he's talking about events, and I was like, well, yeah, this happened then, this happened then, this happened then. I said, and then remember the first time that y'all flew me out, it was October of 2019, and I went to the DNA night. It was the first time y'all had gotten all your leaders together, and your dad preached on Naomi and Ruth, and he did the whole thing where he opened with the story, blah, blah, blah. And Logan looked at me and he goes, not in any condescending way, so don't get offended if you're listening to this, but like, because I have like family that's like on the spectrum, but you know, there's certain types of people that are on the spectrum that have an increased memory.
Yeah.
And he told me, he said, I think that there's something in your brain that is...
Yeah, you remember every quote, every date. Like,
yeah,
you have a weird...
I have a weird memory. I have a weird
good,
brain.
though.
But it's a blessing and a curse because there's things I want to forget. But is like, it still trapped?
And I think that's the good part about... What I always say is I have a really good short-term memory. I have a terrible long-term memory. So here's what that means for processing. I have a really hard time processing my childhood. I do probably feel like I can't remember more than a handful of things and moments. Again, so then I'm always in my head going, is that because I'm blocking it out? Or am I have a horrible long-term memory? And you can ask me, you know, about events and things that happened this year, and I'm just going to... I won't remember it, but short term, I have a really good memory, and so for processing, it's hard for me. Here's the double-edged sword, right? Somebody could say something that's kind of offensive to me, and I'll forget it. And I won't probably hold a grudge,
which is a great weapon.
It is. I don't hold grudges. Yeah, it's very hard for me to hold a grudge for anybody for a real long time. Like, you know, so. That's the good part about it. The bad part is I don't remember a lot of stuff. I don't even remember my kids when they were very little, very much. Like you know what I mean?
I've often joked with you. I was like, you know, one day if I end up leaving, I was like, you're not going to remember me.
That'd probably be true eventually. No, I don't forget people, but it's just it's kind of a weird, like you said, kind of it's a blessing and curse both ways. And you remember so much. So you'll usually, do you remember when this happened? It was like February 13th because I remember. I'm like, what the.
Yeah, it really is a blessing and a curse, and the curse, especially when it comes to like friendships and relationships. I can't, because I don't hold grudges either, but I never forget anything. I know it. Like I can, like one day in a marriage, I will have to. I mean, this is all like hypothesizing right at this point, but I think, you know, again, the good side is I'm not easily angered or hold grudges. Yeah. But the flip side is I will never forget anything. So I remember every word.
Yeah, that's not fun to be in a relationship with somebody that remembers everything, and so every argument.
So obviously, like, you know, I've had to learn in friendships and relationships, like, I may remember that. I don't need to bring that up. And I need to make sure I don't factor that into. Yeah. But for me, it's more like I have enough EQ to not like bring up every little thing I remember, even though it's like a hammer going through my brain because it's cemented there. But I have to. My bigger thing is I have to make sure I don't let it factor into how, like, this current situation or this current conversation or argument or whatever.
So I guess to answer your question, I don't have a specific moment or rhythm that I kind of like, okay, process, but I'm kind of plagued in the fact that when I have things that are in there, it kind of never goes away. Like I'll have these, it's like having 6 burners on your stove. And when I'm processing something that I will process for months at a time, it just kind of never goes away. It's just put on simmer in the back burner. So I have a few things like that are significant that I feel like I'm just constantly, like any little thing comes up and I'm thinking about it.
Okay, so I know you're saving some for, future talks, projects, whatever.
Yeah, I can't give too much.
But to help our listeners, I feel like my therapy session was last week. To help our listeners, like, let's get practical. So this year, how are you processing this year? What do you do? Like, what are you processing? Like, how do you find takeaways from that? What do you do with those takeaways? Like, walk me through your process of processing.
I don't. That's a great question because I don't process a year. I think we.
Oh, you never think, okay.
I don't think in that terms.
Oh.
I don't process a year. I don't think in that regard. I know we have calendar, and I think it's great too. We're doing it here. That's not the way. Here's what I think for me that does stick because I forget a lot in that regard. What does stick are the really impactful emotional things. I think the things we forget the least are the things that are the most emotionally hitting.
Yeah.
So for me, what usually I do is I process what I'm emotionally kind of like in that particular season less than I go back in a short term.
Yeah.
And just kind of like, well, how did that season go? I don't ever think of it in those terms.
No.
How did that quarter go? How did that half of a year go? I don't ever think of it in the terms. It's usually what I've just gotten better at is actually processing more in the moment when something like we did it, I think on here, right? Was just, remember processing about like what we kind of felt and experienced coming back from the LA trip, right?
Yeah.
Like when there are moments that hit me in a more profound or visceral way, that's when I usually, so it's kind of like I'm doing great and I feel really healthy. Where I'm now using a counselor is when I have moments that I'm like, I can't shake why am I thinking about this all the time? Where that kind of thing just hit me. Like we talked about being in the room and just having something like, it just kind of affected your soul a little bit. And you're like, okay, why am I feeling this way? That's almost more. It's got, because I think, and again, maybe it's a little different. If you're someone who probably, here's what I can't fathom. So you can maybe tell me, I'm not saying you're like this, but maybe you're a little bit more, because I am probably a little bit more steady and less emotional high, emotional low. When I do experience an emotional high or an emotional low, it stands out. And it's like, especially emotional low, like it sits with me longer. And now I think where I've gotten to the place of just kind of like life and learning and the season that I needed to for a while, but is the value of, okay, I reach out and I go, hey, I'd love to talk if you got some time. And then I process. So it's kind of when I hit those moments, I kind of reach out as a check-in to go, why am I feeling this way? And is it connected to something deeper? That's not always a past or a childhood or this. Sometimes it can be, but why do I feel this way? What's it connected to? And sometimes it's about the past. Sometimes it's about the future.
Yeah.
And so the reason why I say this is because I don't know if somebody who is more of an emotional person, like there's some people that I know, I'm not saying you're this way, they would be very emotional. Like it's always, they feel stuff all the time. So I can imagine if you feel stuff all the time, how do you pick and choose what you do? For me, it's probably more steady. And when I do experience it, that's when I'm usually going, I need to process this. And so I've had a couple moments like that. So when you say, how do you process this whole last year? I go.
But it's funny. Even now, it's like interesting for me to hear that from you because it explodes. Like me and you've had conversations before where, like, I'm like, oh, we're gonna process that, and you're like, oh,
why?
Why would we?
Why would we? Why do we need to process that?
This helps me understand. Okay.
Yeah, and so if it affects me emotionally,
Yeah.
Now I'm learning that there are other moments that may not affect me emotionally, but may affect other people emotionally, and go, I need to probably stop and check in and process with, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I almost look at, and maybe it'd be good to even nuance, we were talking about this offline, the difference of like processing versus reflecting, like, because for me, I try to, not like a SWAT, but I've swatted a year before. And like when I think of processing, reflecting, part of me it's not this mechanical, but I think of a SWAT. Like you don't SWAT an event based on how emotional it was. You want to review every event. You want to review every Sunday. You want to review every year.
Yeah, but you can't do that when you don't remember it.
So to me, I think I try to. I don't always. I try to at the end of, like, we break our ministry calendar into seasons.
By the
like,
way, hold on real quick.
Yep.
For anybody that is just now listening and going, what in the world are you talking about?
Yeah.
A SWOT is just a method of looking at something through
Yeah.
the lens of its strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Yeah.
I just thought it would
no,
go
good.
on.
Yeah, it's
just
good.
because you're saying it,
Yeah.
it's language that we're used to,
Yeah.
but somebody that's tuning in might be, what?
Yeah, there's a business acronym we use here because we're high on evaluation.
Yeah.
And it's an evaluation tool. Yeah. Acronyms: SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats.
Yeah.
And so I've started using that at times in my life, or I'll SWOT the year. I've not done that the last couple
That's
years,
great.
but I'll SWOT the year, I'll SWOT the season.
So what does your SWOT look like?
Well, again, I didn't SWAT it this year. But like my point is, is it Socrates, an unexamined life is a life not worth living? Like I try to go back. I try to look back, at times each month or okay, let me ask you this. Like, do you, and again, you are very steady Eddie. Mm-hmm. I'm that weird place. I think I've talked about this before, not to get super psychoanalytical, but they say for the Enneagram people out there, they say the hardest emotional place to be on the Enneagram is between a 3 and a 4, because you're both thinker and feeler, because you're both nostalgic and future oriented.
Yeah.
And that's me. So I would say, I don't think anybody that knows me would say I'm driven or controlled by my emotions. I feel like I'm very in control of my emotions. And I live in my head and I think deeply. But I do also feel deeply. And so those two, at times, my mind can be either a beautiful place or a prison. But then so for me, maybe this wouldn't be necessary for you. But for me, I try to pay attention to like my internal climate pretty regularly, and if on a somewhat at times daily, but like weekly basis, process even just on weekly. Whoa, okay, what's going on inside me? Like, why is my tank so low or so high? Why am I giving so much thought to this? Why do I keep having conversations in my head about this? Why do I feel and then try to make adjustments. Do
you have a regular rhythm for that weekly?
I mean, it's not like on the calendar,
okay.
But in my mind, I'm constantly processing and evaluating. I feel like over the last few days, like we talked about, last week, you make fun of me, the weather. I felt it. I had somebody text me yesterday, and I hate it when this happens. My pride hates when this happens. I had somebody text me yesterday, like, "Hey, were you okay today?" And I'm like, "Why?" Like, I don't know. You just seemed off. I was like, it was a great day. We were just having a great day. I was like, but I think, it's just one of those moments where I knew in my mind the accumulation of a bunch of little things, plus coming back from Raleigh, adrenaline fading from, this whole crazy season, weather, gray sky. It was just all this came together. And I was just like, man, I found myself for several days, like in a blah. And so I processed and I literally said last night, no more gray spirit just because of gray skies. And I put in my Evernote this morning, choose your spirit today, no more. So like that would be like a thing for me. And then there's a little moderation. So I like today I was like, no social media. Because I find that sometimes if I'm feeling a little blue or blah, I can just quickly get back into scrolling, doom scrolling. And so I'll have to make a quick adjustment. No, I'll literally just put no more social media for the next 2 days.
Maybe that's a good way to...
I don't know. I don't even know if any of this helps. This is like, I guess, micro processing. But
maybe there is what's probably good for us is to learn about ourselves. I guess that one thing we could take is that we're different. What is important for everybody is learning yourself, knowing, I think, as I said, for me, I'm probably a little bit more even keel emotionally than some. Some would say most.
Yes.
But when I feel something dip, then I know I need to probably check in, or I need to see like what's going on. And again, me is like, okay, I'm feeling that. Why? I need to figure this out. I got to think. Got to understand, why do I feel this way? Because I do think emotions are attached to something.
Yes.
Always.
Yes.
I don't ever want to think emotions just exist in an empty vacuum. Like they are attached to something. And so I always want to kind of process that. I think that all of us can be a little different. I think it's good for us to recognize, maybe even we may not always know what's going on internally, but maybe clues can be something we can be aware of.
Yeah.
So you find yourself scrolling, doomsday scrolling more, then maybe that should be a trigger to go, okay, hold on.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we can just ignore it, right?
Yes.
I'm just doing this. I'm just doing that, and these things don't matter. But you go, no, there's got to be a reason. Like again, it's almost like I think even a physical checkup or something. Like I told you, I said, man, I just feel like I haven't had a lot of energy at the gym. Well, you can just go, yeah, I just haven't had a lot of energy lately.
Yeah.
Or you can say, maybe there's a reason for that.
Yep. You go check up.
Right? So is it a physical checkup, or is it something else? Or you know what I mean? Maybe your testosterone's low. Maybe this. Like so how do we I think that the good thing is you got to learn yourself and where your clues are, what the cues are, even for like where you need to kind of check in.
Yeah. And maybe
health.
And maybe if I could just even put some practicals, because I think that's great. Maybe for anybody listening, it's like, okay, I don't even process, or where do I even begin? Maybe just a couple practicals.
Yeah.
I think three people you need to three ways you need to process with that I would say, and I think all three are equally important.
Okay.
Maybe some more important in certain seasons. You need to process with yourself. You need to process with others, and you need to process with God. I'm healthiest when I'm doing all three of those things. And so process with yourself. What I mean is, again, this is an indicator for me. When my soul's a little low, I will distract myself.
Sure.
I will add more noise.
Yeah.
More distraction. More.
I'm sure most people do.
Social media. Yeah. And the thing that I want to do least in those seasons, when I finally do it, actually helps me most, which is to create some oxygen for my soul. Get off my phone a bit. Get off social media. Get out and allow my brain, as much as I want to numb it with distraction, don't allow myself to, and actually just be. And I find when I finally do that, a little peace returns, but then my thoughts begin to crystallize what I'm actually thinking, and my feelings begin to surface what I'm actually feeling. I think processing with yourself, a great way to do that for some people is journaling. And so I've journaled more recently than I have in forever. Journaling. And then I think what you said at the beginning is great, processing with others. Sometimes it's not you don't really have your soul reflected back to you until you have the mirror of another person, especially in some seasons, a professional person.
Yep.
And then for me, I think we talked about it some last podcast, or a few podcasts ago, whatever, is for me, I have to process with God. I have to, all right, God, here's what I'm actually thinking, feeling.
Yeah.
And when I do that, I walk away with my perspective adjusted, or recalibrated a little bit inside, or challenged, or it's just a great stabilizer, and it helps me so much when I process with God. So that's just a few thoughts, and then I think maybe if you hear this and you're like, man, if you do feel like, man, I do kind of want to take inventory this year.
Yeah,
I think there's something powerful about both businesses, and both professionally and personally, taking inventory of a year. And maybe a starting place for some people, 4 categories. Luke 2:52. You probably know it by heart.
Go ahead.
Where Jesus grew in stature.
She pondered all these things in her heart.
Luke 2:52?
Oh, no, that's a different part.
No.
I was thinking of a different part. I just read the story.
Jesus grew in stature and wisdom. And faith. And if you look at it, you see 4 quadrants. His relational, intelligence, physical, and spiritual. And so sometimes it's powerful just put those 4 on a paper. Your relationships, your spiritual life, your physical health, and your mental, emotional intelligence, how that's going. And just, how am I doing here?
Yeah.
How's my relationship with God? How are my relationships with others? Physical, where's my health at? And just look at that. And then that can become a great like springboard to cast vision for the new year.
Yeah.
As I've probably mentioned it every year. As a mentor once told me when I was kicking myself around, he said, Russ, every year you can take lessons or you can take losses. And it's up to you. I can go into the new year in a mental deficit of everything that went wrong or everything I could have done better, or I can go and say, okay, that was an educational experience.
Yeah.
And now I know where I want to grow.
Yeah. I think it's kind of the old adage, what is the one, what's the I can't get the exact wording for it, but what's the one about if you don't learn lessons from the past, you're doomed to repeat them?
Yeah.
How does it go? Is it something along that, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
And I think what we're talking about is just the whole idea that if you do not actually learn from or kind of pull from your moments and your experiences, and you're just going to carry it into the next year, and you're going to do the same thing. And so I think processing can be really powerful. I also think that it's fluid, and it's not like, I think it's great. I think what we recognize is that we're very different in how we do it.
Yes.
But we do both agree that it's important.
Yeah.
And so I think, even those three things that you mentioned, a lot of times I will, in the order of it, like if I'm feeling something, it'll just be kind of like simmering in there, but I won't sometimes. Here's the challenge for me. I am such an external processor that I struggle with just internalizing it and processing it. So what I have found is that when I can process it with somebody, counselor or others, then it helps me to be able to process it internally, which then helps me give it to God.
Yeah.
So I kind of almost need those pieces to fit in a certain way for it to work well for me. And that's what I think is kind of learning what works for you. But
that's a great point.
I do think that what does matter is that we learn and grow and become someone different, and we get better.
Yeah.
And I think if you do not stop to do it, you're going to just be doomed to repeat the same thing.
Yeah.
And so every year is going to be filled with highs and lows. It's going to be filled with pain. It's going to be filled with celebration. It's going to be filled with all of those things. And after a while, it can almost literally feel like Groundhog Year. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like every year, it's just another piece of life, and something happens, and it goes through. The same. We do the same stuff this time every year.
Yep.
What are the major events that happen? What do we talk about? There's wars in the world. There's people who died. There's books that we read. There's things that happen.
Yep.
The same thing's going to probably happen again in 25.
Yep.
We're just going to go around the sun one more time, and it's going to be the exact same thing, except that the only thing that's going to be different is what I take into the following year. Who I am.
That's good.
And so you're going to have highs, you're going to have lows, we're going to experience all these things. You're going to have some financial challenges, you're going to have some windfalls, you're going to have some other things that are going to happen. It's all going to happen. It's just life. It happens. And I was just telling someone in a meeting that I had, I said, as I get older, I said, everybody hates the idea of aging and getting older. I don't. There's parts of me that you start to realize you're like, gosh, you can't slow this train down, and it is just going, and you are going to be irrelevant. I mean, I literally had this thought. This is again one of the thoughts I had driving around. I think it was yesterday, the day before. I was like, because things are so big, and that's why it's important to process. I was like, in 100 years, no one's ever going to remember me. Like literally.
It is
forgotten.
Very weird thought.
Like I literally forgotten. And so when I was thinking about that, I was like, I really need to live in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
My one life needs to be, I need to capture this and just experience it and do what I really feel like I'm supposed to do this, because like it's almost like this idea. I think part of it is I want to leave a deposit for people 100 years from now.
Yeah.
But also realize no one's going to remember me 100 years from now. They're just not. Like I'm that irrelevant to the big picture story when you look at that. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but I mean that almost kind of inspired me to go, I just really need to take hold of right now and just make sure that what I'm doing in this moment.
Yeah.
Like whether it's the end of the year offering this and I can get a chance to give in this, that's a moment that I can just be in right now, because 100 years from now it is just not going to matter.
How can we live beautifully present?
Yeah. And so I don't even love reflecting on the past, even though I know it's important. But I also have found that so much I've spent my life stuck in a future that doesn't exist, may never exist, or one that I'll never reach.
Yeah.
And so for me, like the greatest challenge for me has always been like, how do I actually embrace the present?
No, that's great.
And that's a kind of a journey for me. It's still a struggle. I'm just not. I'm always that. We always talk about this, and I use this analogy. I'm always, when are we going to get there?
Yep.
And not the one who enjoys the car ride.
Yep.
And I'm trying to learn to enjoy the car ride.
Yeah.
Maybe I just need a better car.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it is. So, but a lot of this, I think,
Yeah.
is just the idea of us processing. I think it's just come from growth,
Yep.
internal growth.
Yep.
Whatever. So,
I love this conversation.
Yeah.
Let's process so that we can find healing and redemption from the past, purpose for the future, but be amazingly present in the moment.
Yeah.
And so take some time wherever you're listening, watching. Take some time to process. I do had some housekeeping items at the beginning. I got a couple of housekeeping items here at the end.
End of the year?
End of the year. Number one.
Okay.
We're so thankful for you. Thank you for joining these conversations.
Yeah.
It's meaningful to us. Number two, I haven't mentioned this yet. Go leave a review.
You did?
Please review.
His memory's not that good.
Number three is this. Yeah, I know. I've had more people than usual ask about Bible reading plans. And I know we have a lot of people from our faith community that listen in.
Yeah.
And I just want to give this. It is not too late to begin a new year.
Yeah.
And some people have asked me what I do. I've done this last, 8 years. It's it's called the 5-Day Bible Reading Plan. It has Old Testament, New Testament, Psalms every day. Even if you miss 2 days a week, and do 15 minutes a day, you'll get through the entire Bible in a year. And even if you don't get through it in a year, it's just a great, easy plan to keep you on track. And you can go to www.5daybiblereading.com. This is not a paid endorsement. If they hear this and they want to, you can pay me. But 5daybiblereading.com. And then I want to give a shameless plug. By the time this comes out, if we're friends on social media, you can go to, I'm releasing a 21-day confidence devotional through the life of Saul and David.
Nice.
And so I'm releasing it like New Year's Eve or the day before. But I'm going to be posting about it. I've not posted about it yet as of this recording. But anyways, if we're friends on social media, you can go find it.
That's cool.
If you want to begin the year 21 days of confidence. And we talked about it. Make sure you listen to our recap through the X Church.
Yeah, if it's not too late,
yeah.
it'll be December 29th, depending on when this comes out. I think this comes out on the 27th.
Yes.
Really important day. But
And then we talk about so much coming up of how to begin the year strong.
Yeah.
With the fast. And of course, we're going to be doing a podcast to talk about that. But anyways, hopefully this has been an amazing year for you. Take some time to process the good and the bad, everything in between, believing 2025. That's crazy to say.
Come alive.
Will be your best
in
year
2025.
yet. Alive in 5.
Yeah. Alive in 25.
All right. We'll see you next week.
Hey guys, it's Russ. Thanks so much for listening. We really believe if we can get around tables instead of behind screens, if we can talk to each other instead of at each other, we can make the world better. To help us do that, here are a few things you can do to help. First, if you haven't yet, leave a review on Apple or Spotify and hit subscribe on YouTube. This helps more than you know. Also, if you have been impacted by the community out of which this podcast comes, that's X Church. Maybe you're local or you've been touched by the messages and impact across the country, even the world. I want to encourage you to support this work. A powerful life principle is to invest in the people and places that invest in you. And so I want to invite you to do that right now by going to thex.church/give. You can give a one-time small gift, a sacrificial gift, or even become a recurring partner. Together, let's keep elevating the conversation, thinking higher, loving deeper, and making the world better. Cheers.